Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode of International Working Women of Finland. And today we will talk about discrimination in workforce. And before we begin, my name is Priyanka Banerjee. I'm the secretary of the board of IWWOF RU. And today with me, we have Lucia to co-host this event. We have two wonderful guests who are joining us from the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health, Työterveyslaitos, and they will be giving us a presentation about what discrimination means, but also what are the different demographics that face discrimination during recruitment, and then go through their guide of building a more inclusive recruitment system. This is a public event because we wanted to open it to everybody who is interested in this topic, and because today it is a bit more about not just about international women, but opening the demographic to a wider audience. And therefore, just to introduce what International Working Women of Finland is, some of you might know us if you are the member of our group, but some of you might be new. So just a very quick introduction of who we are and what we do. IWWOF was born in August 2019 as a Facebook group. So we are not that new, but we have grown over 5,700 members in this short period of time. And we are constantly growing, and we are super proud of that, and really celebrate the diversity that we have in our group. So our members are from all walks of life, from different backgrounds, from different expertise, professional background, young, old, every kind of people we have in our group. And you might see that the name has International Working Women of Finland, and sometimes it is people think it's about international people, but we actually celebrate identity over nationality. And therefore we invite everyone who is internationally minded, who wants to take part in the conversation of building inclusion in the society, and all the women and non-binary people who identify as internationally minded are warmly welcome to join our community. So if you're watching this and you are not a part of our group, please visit our Facebook group and join us. We bring you wonderful content like this and give you a community that empower and support each other. And saying that, thank you, Kirsi and Barbara, our guests for today, who are also supporting this community and our members by providing their time, their energy, and their expertise with us. And so without too much delay, I will hand the stage over to both of them so that they can give a little introduction about who they are and then take us through what discrimination means so we can have a wonderful conversation around it. Keep this very conversational. We love to interact on chat. Most of the times our chats are bursting with wonderful comments and questions, so feel free to do that. Over to you, Kirsi and Barbara. Please take over the stage and let's get going. I have stopped my sharing, so you can share, and let me know if you want me to share the screen or anything.
I can do that,
Yeah. Thank you. And so we are from the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health. First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to join this platform. We really appreciate it. So our organization is a multidisciplinary research and specialist organization that focuses on well-being at work, research, advisory services, and training. We operate under the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health as an independent legal entity. And I work as a leading specialist here, and I have been working with diversity issues for now more than 15 years, mostly with cultural diversity issues, but in recent years more diversity at large. And Kirsi, would you present yourself?
Yeah, thank you, and also want to thank you for this opportunity to speak about this important topic. And my background that is relevant to this event today is that I work as a senior specialist at the Institute of Occupational Health, and the background that is relevant to this event today is that I have been involved in developing those recruitment guidelines that promote diversity, and which we are going to talk through this afternoon in the Manifold More project, which we are also going to talk a little bit more about soon. And in my previous roles, I have also been involved in projects that have to do with managing diversity at the workplace. So therefore I'm here today. And now you Barbara, can carry on.
Thank you. And will you change the slide? Thank you. So briefly, we are presenting some facts about discrimination in recruitment in Finland. Just some facts, because the time won't allow us to cover it more broadly. And as Priyanka already said, we are presenting our guide that we published in February. And we hope to have an intensive and good discussion after our presentation. Thanks. Next. And we have been working with these issues or questions related to recruitment in our Manifold More project that is funded by the European Social Fund, and we collaborate with the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare in this project. And we have several aims in this project, but one of these aims, or actually all, are in some way also related to promoting diversity in working life and advancing career paths of highly educated women with foreign background. And you can find our more information about our project on our website, and also on the website of the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare. Thanks. And I'm sure you all know what is meant by discrimination, but maybe it's in place to briefly say what we think with discrimination. It's when a person is treated less favorably or placed in a less favorable position based on personal characteristics without a justifiable reason. So this is our starting point, and we are concentrating or focusing on discrimination in recruitment. Thanks. Next, yes. So discrimination in employment is prohibited by the Finnish law, and there are two central laws in this regard. With regard to diversity, and it's the Non-Discrimination Act and the Equality Act. And in this act, there are mentioned these different grounds that are if you are discriminated based on these, it's prohibited by the law. And there, and if you think about recruitment, there are many laws in addition to these laws. And even if it's prohibited by the Finnish law, it seems that that not all employers and recruiters are aware of the full implications of these laws. In the eyes of the laws, it's a question also of discrimination when it has been unintentional by the employer, or it's sort of a consequence of some negligence. So I think there is really a place for building or developing the awareness of these law issues. It's only one issue, of course, in this regard. But anyways, we know that even if it's prohibited, it does happen. I don't know if it's a lot, but at least too often, and for some groups, really too often. And the next slide, please. And last year we conducted, as part of the Manifold project, a diversity barometer. We have conducted a diversity barometer 3 times before, and this time we had a special focus on recruitment questions, and the respondents to the diversity barometer was Finnish personal professionals. We had 250 respondents from both, they were both from public organizations and private organizations. And we asked them, have you observed intentional or unintentional discrimination in recruitment in your organization? And 11% of all respondents said that yes, they had observed discrimination. And I think this is a quite high number if we think that they're sort of telling about their own organization and in many organizations, the HR personnel is not involved in all phases of recruitment, so they actually can't see everything that's going on, but they had observed, and those who had observed also said that in open-ended questions that when they had observed these situations, they had intervened and sort of made it clear that this is not okay, this is discrimination. And in open-ended questions, they also mentioned, or we asked what were the most common grounds for discrimination, and the most common grounds that were mentioned were foreign background and female gender. Other mentioned grounds were age, partial work capacity, deviance, and in internal recruitment, personal chemistry. And the diversity barometer is available on internet, unfortunately, however, only in Finnish. But this as a background, thanks. And then to age discrimination. And here are facts from 2 studies. The Confederation of Finnish Industries conducted in 2018 a quite large study with respondents, more than 2,200 respondents of a working age, and 10% of all said that they had been discriminated in recruitment. I think it was in the last 2 years. And it affected most people that were 55 years old or older. So this is clearly a sign of age discrimination in Finland. And Akava Special Branches conducted study last November among their members, and this was a quite large study as they had many respondents, more than 4,600, and more than half of them had applied for jobs during the past 2 years, and 20% of those who had applied for jobs said that they had been discriminated during the recruitment process, and half of these cases when they were asked what were the reason for discrimination, it was high age. And if we look at the percentages of job applicants in the age group 50 to 59, 41% reported that they had been discriminated, and in this age group 60 and over, more than half of the respondents or job applicants had been discriminated according to their own experiences. And on the next slide, we have some quotes, interview quotes from those who had experienced age discrimination. They did in the study, in addition to the survey study, also interviews. So you can read them yourselves. I don't need to read them, but yeah, maybe I read this. I think this is, if we think about a 46-year-old person, and this is not in the most discriminated, age discriminated group. You do have a few working years left, I was told, as 46 years old. In fact, the person has about 20 years left of working life, or even more, actually. And this last one it was a case of a 62-year-old person who had applied for jobs in the more than 26 jobs in the same city, and she or he or they were competent for all the jobs. And this person got a job through an anonymous interview. Now we don't know if the person really meant an anonymous interview or an anonymous application, but it's possible to do also the whole recruitment process as anonymous. So, and in Finland,
Just Barbara, just to also ask this question, because many of the people who get discriminated during the recruitment process, they don't know how to report it or where to report it, because they're still not a part of the company because the process is going on. So do you have any tips like where and how to report such cases when the discrimination is happening during the recruitment process?
Very good question. And actually, some studies show that more than 90% of people don't do anything in these situations. And of course, one has the right to ask for grounds and for the choices and criteria from the employer. So that would be one thing. And then you can ask for advice and help from AVI. Now I don't know what it is in English, aluehallintovirasto, but those who sort of supervise that that the laws pertaining to working life and working safety and things like that are really followed. And then you can also contact and look at the pages, web pages of the ombuds. I think I have it on the name. What is it? Yhdenvertaisuusvaltuutettu. It's ombudsman. Yeah, and if it depends on the grounds of discrimination, if it's for example it's gender, then it's then actually the Equality Act is used. But it's a good question, and it's quite difficult for people to do something in these cases. And actually, this has been sort of been discussed, and last year it was done this kind of evaluation of the law or the non-discrimination law, and one consequence of the evaluation was that it has been discussed that it should be done more easy for people who have been discriminated to do something in their situation, and the law is probably partly going to be changed, or the work starts this year. So I think it will be easier in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. And maybe someone, Kirsi, maybe you can write on the chat the names of the sites.
Sure. Yes, Aluehallintovirasto is regional state administrative agency, and I just write it down. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Actually, I have a question from Mareike, if I can interrupt you to just make the conversation going. And her question is that she's a UK-trained occupational therapist. She just received accreditation from Valvira, which she's happy about, and her field is mental health. And she understands there is a need for these kind of professionals, especially in the mental health department. But now she's able to practice in Finland. In order to be able to practice, she needs to complete the B1 Finnish level. And of course, she doesn't have it, so she's asking she cannot practice her occupation. Maybe it's a form of discrimination. So what do you think about it?
It depends. We have a slide on language here later on, but we can as well discuss it here. It depends on if the job really requires that level of Finnish language. So it depends on the job requirements. Now I don't, I can't make any conclusions if the job really requires a certain level of Finnish. But if it doesn't, then it is a question of discrimination.
Okay, great. Thank you. Actually, Marika is raising her hands. Would you like to unmute yourself and maybe have
Is that okay? Hello,
Yes,
everyone.
Very quickly, Marika, so that we can take it later afterwards if we have the time, but very quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Well, then we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, so let's do that. We have
Thank
15
you.
minutes for discussion, so let's.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and I just want to say that there might well be people in the audience who knows more about some of these things, as for example, the last question. We are not specialists actually on that. We have more looked at what employers should do and organizations. But yeah, so the next slide, please. And actually, yeah, so and we know that foreign-born people are discriminated on different grounds in the Finnish working life and our labor market. And really, if fluent Finnish proficiency if it can't be used as a selection criterion or a certain level of Finnish proficiency if the job doesn't require it, as we just a moment ago spoke. And last year, in one of the European Social Funds project, Kotona Suomessa, it was conducted a study on, I think there were more 2009 respondents, and those were people who were responsible for recruitment in their organizations. And less than a quarter of them said that they were ready to recruit a person whose Finnish is not fluent. And this is a fact number. And our question is that is fluent Finnish really needed in so many jobs? My guess is that not. And there are, so of course, if we think about this language question, there are also, of course, also other solutions that can be used in organization. For example, the hybrid model. In regard to language use and so on, but we know that that Finnish proficiency requirements are also used as a basis or to justify that you don't select a foreign-born person, but it might be discriminative. And the next slide, please. And I guess you're most of you are familiar with the study by Ahmed Aklak that was published a little bit more than a year ago, and he did this study. This is a very good field study that actually shows factual discrimination, not about experiences, not to lessen people's experiences, but this is interesting. He sent 5,000 job applications with Finnish, English, Russian, Somali, and Iraqi names, and they were identical CVs and applications, and all applicants were fluent in Finnish, had schooling from Finland and work experience from Finland. So these were these grounds that often are referred to, that you should have work experience from Finland and the Finnish should be fluent and so on. Nonetheless, those applicants with a Finnish name were much more likely to be called for a job job interview, and if you had those applicants who had a foreign name had to send 1.5 to 4 times more applications in order to get an interview compared to a person with a Finnish name. And those who had the most difficulties in getting calls or invitations for job interviews were Somali men. And actually in this study, females did get more interview invitations than men. So it's not always so that women are discriminated more. But these fields that the jobs pertain to that people applied for, I think they were not expert jobs. They were things, I think, for example, if I remember correctly, catering or these restaurants and different fields. But anyways, this study shows that Finnish doesn't necessarily help. And the study also shows that we in Finland have this kind of ethnic hierarchy, that some people have even more difficult to get a job. And next slide, please.
Sorry to interrupt,
yeah.
but I think you should speed up a little bit so that
okay.
we have time to.
So yeah, so thanks. So we know that we have racism in Finland and in recruitment, and actually, according to a study by the Fundamental Rights Agency, more than other European countries. And last year, the non-discrimination ombudsman did a study among people of African American descent in Finland, and nearly 60% of them reported that they had been discriminated in recruitment. Thanks, and Kirsi, you can continue.
I think you were going to go through this slide, Barbara, still.
Yeah. So, and this is about women and men, and so about overqualification, and this concerns people who are employed. And just briefly, that we know that if you compare women and men and foreign-born and those with Finnish background, foreign-born are much more qualified for their jobs, but this regards particularly foreign-born women. And even if the Finnish language is at least advanced, at an advanced level, and you have a Finnish degree, foreign-born women, 30% of them who are employed are overqualified for their jobs. And the source for this is Yüksel and her colleagues at THL from the Manifold project. There is the link to this blog, and this about this. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. And I'll go quickly through some facts about how people with disabilities face discrimination in Finland. And this is an issue that touches a large number of people, as there are nearly 2 million Finns of working age who have some type of disability or chronic disease, and 600,000 have found that the disease or disability affects their work opportunities. And these numbers are from the government's OTEKI project that aim to develop career opportunities for people who have a partial workability. So this is another big group of people who are affected by discrimination in recruitment and in access to work market in general. And then in 2020, the Finnish Association of People with Physical Disabilities commissioned a study which found that only 57% of employers would consider hiring a person with physical disability. And while the main obstacle for hiring was seen to be the physical nature of the work, also attitudes and lack of awareness were mentioned among the obstacles for hiring. And of those employers, only 14% reported having knowingly hired a person with physical disability. So we see that this is also an area that needs lots of education and awareness building in terms of improving the situation of people with disabilities and with regard to the access to labor markets. And in addition to the groups that we've mentioned, there are also very many other grounds, for example, those mentioned on the slide for discrimination. And it should also be mentioned that the likelihood for discrimination increases if a person belongs to say more than one disadvantaged group. And thus this is obviously also the case. And this clear discrimination that so many different groups face in Finland, and which was evidenced in all those stats that we just went through, does not only hurt the people who are subjected to it, but it also hurts the organizations, because we know from research that diverse work community has a positive impact on a number of things. For example, the ones on this slide, the organization's innovativeness and creativity, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. So this is a situation where when we have all this discrimination in recruitment, that does not only hurt the people who are subjected to it, but also the organizations who are not hiring people from these groups. And you are probably all very aware what is meant by employee diversity, but just quickly to recap that it refers to how employees differ in terms of, for example, age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, family situation, and so on. And however, this diverse personnel alone does not bring about any benefits, but it has to be managed in a way to harness the benefits. And we believe that the promotion of diversity in an organization really begins with the recruitment practices that take equality and non-discrimination into account. And so to tackle these very obvious obstacles and discrimination, we have developed a 10-point guide to promote diversity in the Manifold More project that Barbara just talked about. And this is a guide that caters for different stages of the recruitment process. And we could next show you the 10 points of the guide and go through in more detail a few of them, the ones that we think are especially important. But to begin with, let me just say that under each point, this guide can be found from our website. And there's I think the address was on the previous slide. But anyhow, under each of these points, there is more advice aimed at the organization on how to go about with these points that we here make. And we believe that promoting diversity in recruitment begins with examining the state of diversity in the organization. And that begins, or in that situation, it is advisable to ask questions such as how diverse is the organization at the moment, and is there areas of diversity that would need improvement and such issues. And there's also the question about positive action. Barbara, I was wondering, would you like us to cover that?
Just one question, very quick
sure.
question, Kirsi, on the first topic, examine diversity in your organization. And maybe you can clarify that, because a lot of people have been saying that, no, it's not legal in Finland to ask about somebody's sexual orientation or some other kind of religion. So maybe you can open up like what kind of things are okay for the employers to ask to the employees so that we don't have these excuses.
Yeah, I don't think we here mean asking from the employees such questions. It's not like collecting a survey among the employees, but just generally speaking, looking at are there, for example, what is the age range? How is the would the organization, for example, benefit from a wider age distribution or having more people of different genders in technical positions, such things, but definitely not sort of surveying the personnel in
like
this
like
regard.
Overall kind of how people feel and what is the status of the organization.
Exactly, yes. And does it look like, does it look like the personnel is sort of the majority of them are under the age of 40 or something like that. These
Maybe you can go through this and then we can dive in deeper if we have time later on. So.
Yeah, sure. Yes. So let's forget the question about positive action for now. Yes, sure. Great. Let me just go back to the. Right. Yes. So after this examining the situation with regard to diversity, then we think it's also important to describe the job and define the evaluation criteria in clear and non-discriminatory manner. And there is, like I said, more advice with regards to these issues on the guide. And then I would like to talk a little bit more about this question about language. As Barbara mentioned, employers in Finland very often demand proficiency in Finnish language. And this, like we already discussed a little bit, this is an area that definitely requires attitude change and employer education, as often Finnish skills are required even for jobs in which they are not actually essentials, or employers are not ready or haven't really thought about ways to accommodate, for example, for working in different languages to harness all the skills of people with foreign background. And in the guide, we advise employers to do some reflection with regards to these language issues in beforehand, and ask, for example, what's an adequate level of Finnish or of language skills to be able to successfully do the jobs, and how important really are good Finnish language skills, for example, for the job. And we also think it's a good to decide beforehand on how language skills are assessed. And for example, is the applicant required to have completed and passed a specific language test, or how the language proficiency will be assessed. And these language issues are important to consider also because when the main language spoken in the workplace is not the employee's mother tongue language, then becomes also both a work tool and something to be learned. And we also know that language is part of professional skills. And if a workplace is language conscious, these diverse meanings of language are recognized, and kind of smooth interaction is supported, so that they ensure that language skills do not become an obstacle to optimizing the use of the full competence of the employee. And what this kind of language consciousness then looks like in a workplace, it depends very much on the situation and on the role. But it can mean, for example, that there is support in learning the languages that are used in the work community, and that there is encouragement of the use of another common language and encouragement of the use of different languages in parallel. And we think that all these sorts of questions are important to be decided before beforehand and before the job is advertised, and generally speaking in the organization. Now, and I now think that Barbara, you were going to talk about the blind or partially blind recruitment.
Yeah, I think actually this audience is quite familiar with blind or anonymous recruitment. But I could tell that it's a sort of it looks like there is a growing interest in organizations to start to use blind recruitment. In our diversity barometer from last year, 12% of the respondents said that they are using or have experimented with some kind of blind recruitment, but lots of them were also telling in open-ended questions that they are considering to take this on their agenda and start to experiment with blind recruitment. And so it seems that it's really gaining interest, and I personally hope that it would be more common in the future. There are also there is a discussion of pros and cons with anonymous recruitment, but I think there are lots of cons. And then we among these guidelines also gave recommendations about the interview situation, and I think that it's actually in this discussion or the debate today, when there is a concentration of this blind recruitment, it's forgotten that it only helps people to get an applicant an interview for an invitation for an interview, and that's already very good, as in that then the people have chances to show their and tell about their competence and motivation and so on. But a really critical phase of the recruitment process, or one very critical phase, is the interview. And this is because we know that recruiters do much more evaluations based on their on stereotypes and values and beliefs, and then they sort of think themselves. Recruiters do overestimate their objectivity, and it's only not a question of stereotypes and prejudices, but we know that people evaluate other people that they think resemble them more positively. We know that people, for example, evaluate a person that has the same letters in his or her name than we have in ourselves. So we evaluate him or her then more positively. We know from research that recruiters evaluate more positively persons with facial features similar to one's own. So I think all these kind of things, that it's really important that that recruiters get education and preparation to do interviews as good and objective as possible. And we know that if people get more aware of this, they sort of do less these kind of discriminative evaluations. That is of course unintentionally, but yeah, so I think this is important. We give also advice on that, for example, how to conduct the interview so that you don't evaluate at the same time when you are interviewing, because then it's much more likely that because of the cognitive load that you do judgments and evaluations based on stereotypes. So I think these are available on internet, but I think this is enough and we could go on to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is like a wonderful 10-point guide. And I think in the beginning, I didn't mention, so in my day job, I do work with the companies to implement these actions in actual action. And I think one of the biggest challenges that the knowing and doing gap. So the companies, they know that they have to do this, but they don't necessarily know how to do it. So that's what we have been trying to work with our company. But for example, I would like to ask a few questions from this guide, which you have, and then we take also the questions from the audience. And so you said that the last one, make clear recruitment practice guidelines and ensure non-discrimination and transparency in selection. Do you have any practical points of how to do that? Because it is, you know, ensuring non-discrimination and transparency is something very objective for every company. So if there are, do you have any practical tips of how to actually implement this step?
Would you, Kirsi, like to?
A difficult question. I was wondering.
I can also, but yeah.
Yeah, well, go ahead, and I can add to your points.
Yeah, actually, we make more a point of in our guide to make sure or try to convince recruiters and employers about the necessity or why it's important to have these guidelines, and why transparency is sort of should be a goal, and so on. And we so we give some advice about that it would be good to for example, to send information to all applicants after a job when the job has been filled, so and give the criteria. We know that people oftentimes don't get any information back after they have, so that kind of, and we also sort of motivate that it also this also affects your public image, because all applicants get a picture of the organization or company when they apply, and sort of they tell and that. And then we also, for example, and we know that some organizations, or that it's not uncommon that, for example, the HR personnel in an organization has worked with good guidelines, and but the recruitments are made by supervisors and managers, and they are not necessarily not aware of these guidelines at all. So I think there is a gap that it's important to ensure that those who the guidelines doesn't help if people don't know about them and don't understand why they are important. So more this kind of,
I think that one of the most common things like which we to implement all of this is educating the HR, the leaders, the managers about their biases and how to go ahead with the recruitment processes. Kirsi, you were saying something.
Yeah, one advice would be to say to tell them to assess their current recruitment practices or processes against these 10 points and see how they do.
And just there was a question from one of the audience that how can we really say if the recruitment process involves discrimination? So how do you identify there is discrimination? As a recruiter, when you are going through it, how would you know this is discrimination? And also someone who is going through discrimination, because a lot of times people who are discriminated against, they don't realize that they are discriminated against. So do you have any tips of how to identify these attributes or pointers?
A very good question, and important one. It might be difficult to know, and discrimination can happen even if you don't. You can be objected to discrimination if you don't know. But there are certain things that, for example, if we already look at the job announcement, if there are mentioned, for example, gender, that age, and things like that. That we want a young person to our youngish team, so that's discriminatory. And so by looking at the job announcement, then, for example, looking at the organization's web pages may tell you can give you some hint about is this organization likely to discriminate or not. If you, for example, the pages show that they sort of are aware of diversity issues, it's less likely that they discriminate. And then, of course, you should see warning flags if in the interview, for example, you are asked questions that the employer is not allowed to ask. For example, are you planning to have a family, and about your spouse, and things like that. It's not allowed by the law, even if the job applicant gives her his consent to ask these kind of questions. It's still forbidden by the law to collect this kind of information. So these are, and then of course it's then it's easier to know that you have been discriminated if you know the person or know the credentials of the person who has been chosen, and you know the criteria which has been used for the job and for the selection, and you see that, for example, I have more experience because they wanted experience in the job, or things like that. But a very good questions, and not easy. Yeah.
And I would also like to add that I think one way to maybe tell or what could hint that there are discriminating factors somewhere along the recruitment practices or recruitment process, which some of which might well be unintentional, is if they look at the compilation of the personnel, look at what the personnel looks like in terms of these different groups and grounds. So that might also give a hint that there's something that they could do better to create a situation where more people or job applicants would be treated equally.
Yeah, and just to continue this discussion, we have like another question in the chat, that is it then on the shoulder of individuals to be aware and understand the discriminatory practices, or it should be also about the companies actively doing something about it and actively having policies to avoid these things? So yeah. I think definitely the companies should be having policies in general and non-discriminatory. But what do you think is the about the people themselves? How important is it to have awareness, or is it just on the company's side?
Again, a very good question, or actually I think it's a comment. It shouldn't be on the individual's shoulder in no case. And if you take a look at the law, it's the employer's responsibility, and that's why we, for example, in this manifold project, we are working with these kind of issues that would help, or HR practices that would sort of lessen discrimination and so on. It's organizations' and companies' responsibility to not to discriminate.
And we have another question. So about the guide, have you tested this guide with the companies, and have you had any feedback? Are they open to implement it, or how has been the reception of this, the project and the work that you're doing?
There's been lots of interest, at least there's been lots of interest towards this guide. It's, when we get these stats about how many people visit our websites, and the website where the site where the guide has been visited lots, and so that tells us that there's definite interest, and the diversity parameter that Barbara talked about also indicated that there is growing interest in organizations to develop their recruitment practices towards a direction that would be more inclusive. And is there something you'd like to add, Barbara?
Yes, and that we haven't tried tried this or experimented with this with organizations, but in this project we have part of this we have tried ourselves in recruitment. THL recruited to project researchers, and some of these were used or actually so
I'll add a link to the blog post about the process, but I think it's all in Finnish.
The blog, I think it was in English also, but
right.
No, it was in Finnish, but Julia's is in English. And then I would like to add this, that we have got actually a very good response about these guidelines, and we feel that we have succeeded in that it seems that workplaces and employers sort of can relate to this, because we don't blame anyone. We, for example, talk about unintentionality. So people don't have to, no, it doesn't concern me, don't get this kind of reaction. And I'm sure that some of these are more easy to implement than others, and organizations can themselves look at what they could do, and even to sort of critically look at your own recruitment practices and check what could be done better, or so that's already advancement.
I think also, like, what I also work with the companies and tell them that unconscious bias or bias, everybody has biases, and there is like nothing wrong about it. It becomes wrong when you stop working towards it, or when you let it describe your actions in recruitment. So I think that's really important, and great work that you are doing. And I think many times when we are talking about discrimination, it's about international people, which is definitely there. But in your presentation, we also saw that international, foreign background and women were one of the major categories. But then we also had people over 55 years of age, people with disabilities, different ethnicities. So there is a huge array of discrimination with different demographics and intersectionality. So is there something that that can help the organizations identify what or where to start from? Because a lot of discussions that I have had with leaders, I identify that it overwhelms them, that this is too much and this is a lot, and sometimes it only comes to the language issue, and then the whole discussion goes around languages. But how not to distract with this language and those kind of issues, and also think about discrimination as a whole, different demographics and array, and how to begin that topic with the organizations. It's just an open conversation, so there doesn't have to be like a proper tip or something, just to your thoughts about it.
So is there other opinions or in the audience? And Mareike had, or how you pronounce, had earlier at least something you wanted to say.
Yes, thank you, Mareike.
Mareike.
Yes, I wonder. I have not had a job offer because I only got it in the letterbox today that I'm now accredited with Barbara, which is great. However, I have sent open application to all sorts of companies in Finland, not under the title of occupational therapist, because I did not have my accreditation by then. But now I'm wondering, I will continue doing that, and I think I should be able to work as an occupational therapist, because my qualifications have been recognized legally by Valvira as equivalent to Germany or UK. I worked in both. And now the only thing is that Finnish, I understand that, I totally get it, and I'm learning, I'm working on it. It's just kind of, while getting to that point, if I was given the opportunity to work in English, I'm not officially allowed to practice. And I think that is really a problem. And I wonder what THL, for example, being occupational health with your main topic, if that was ever considered, or if there's a discussion with Valvira or, something like that.
No, we haven't been discussing with Valvira, and we sort of are not involved in this kind of policy making. So we are only working as an expertise in our own field and trying to help organizations, policy makers and unions, and so we are very impartial and give advice to the different stakeholders of the working life, but we don't, for example, participate in that kind of decisions. But we can raise awareness about these issues.
Okay, so what we will do is that we also have after we finish today's session, we hang out 15 minutes backstage where everyone can have an open conversation with our guests. I will take one very last question, which also is somewhat related to what we have been discussing for today. And that's about the returnees. So Finnish returnees, is there any data on the returnees by any chance? And what do you see? Are they also facing some kind of discrimination during the recruitment process?
Yes, sure. There's a study that was done in 2009, which showed that returnees have a poorer situation compared to non-returnees in access to work. But then I found a study from 2016 which had completely the opposite conclusion. So that's why I didn't add it to this presentation. So, but the situation in 2009, those were longitudinal studies, both looked like the ones that returnees had a, I can't remember quite what the chances, how much lower the chances were at finding work. Mm-hmm. But they were definitely lower than the non-returnees. But in 2016, the situation looked like returnees actually had a better situation and were being also paid more. Mm. So I don't know about the.
Okay. Yeah. So let's continue this discussion backstage. But for now, thank you so much, Barbara and Kirsi, for coming here and giving this wonderful presentation today. Just to summarize our discussion, we have been discussing a lot about the different demographics that have been facing discrimination during the recruitment process, and the 10 guide point, which clearly explains a lot to the organizations how they can start building more inclusion in their companies, but also I think how the implementation could start is just for the leaders and the HR managers to start educating themselves and their companies and their teams about how they can identify what kind of practices they have in their company, what kind of recruitment processes they have, how they can make their interviews more inclusive, their job advertisement, their language, the communication more inclusive. So there are a lot of things that can be done, but the first thing that always starts with is awareness. So thank you, Kirsi and Barbara, for sharing this awareness with us. And if you are willing to work towards creating more inclusion in your organizations, you can contact us, any of the speakers here, to get more information. So thank you, everyone, for being here, and see you backstage.
Thank you so much.